And don't seem to be live on LinkedIn. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Planet Detroit Live. I'm Nina Ignazik. I'm the founder and executive editor of Planet Detroit, and I am really excited to have a fascinating conversation today with some local experts on what is the connection between Michigan's Great Northwoods and Detroit. We've got an incredible panel. A few notes. We are live on YouTube. I think we're live on LinkedIn. I'm not 100% sure about that right now, but this video will also live on our YouTube channel, and I will send that out for everybody. This is a conversation, not a lecture, so we brought together people with some different perspectives and areas of expertise. Our goal is to help you understand what happens 300 miles north of Detroit actually affects your daily life. And we will take audience questions towards the end. If you're watching live and where you're watching live, please have comment in the comments of that post where you're watching, and we will see them here and we will be able to address them. And so before we get started, I want to acknowledge that this webinar accompanies our Great Northwoods series that you can find live now on planetdetroit.org. It's a 4-part series produced with support from the National Wildlife Federation, and it explores various aspects of the connection between Detroit and the Great Northwoods, and it was authored by Allison Burka. Okay, so let's get into it. Why are we having this conversation? When most Detroiters think about up north, we might picture vacation cabins, fall colors, weekend camping trips, but Michigan's northern forests are more than a getaway. They're working ecosystems, and they directly affect our lives here in southern Michigan and Detroit. So these articles examine how Detroit and the Great Northwoods are connected through water, but also through community programs like Detroit Outdoors and through relationships between Detroit residents and Indigenous communities in the Upper Peninsula. The second story examines how climate change is reshaping Michigan's forests and how those changes are connected to health issues like asthma in places like Detroit. We also have a story that examines a federal bill, the Permit Act, that could roll back Clean Water Act protections and potentially put Detroit's and the whole state's drinking water at risk. So these are not abstract environmental issues happening far away. They are directly connected to the water coming out of your tap and the air you breathe. Okay, so now let me introduce our illustrious panel. I'm actually going to ask them to introduce themselves. We have 4 guests. Well, we actually have 3 guests today. One unfortunately could not come. But we're going to start with Mark Smith. I'm going to ask each of you to take about 90 seconds to introduce yourself and tell us what's your connection to this issue and why does the relationship between Detroit and the Northwoods matter to you. I'm going to start with Mark Smith. Mark's the Great Lakes Policy Director at the National Wildlife Federation. Welcome, Mark. What brings you to this conversation today?
Well, thanks, Nina. I appreciate that. Thanks for having me on. And again, Mark Smith at the National Wildlife Federation, working in our Great Lakes office here out of Ann Arbor, Michigan. I do a lot of our Great Lakes water policy and wildlife habitat conservation work here in the region. And so this issue is near and dear to my heart personally and professionally. I grew up hunting and fishing, spending a lot of time outdoors. And it's a personal passion of mine. And so I'm able to merge my personal passions with my professional passions into a career advocating for Michigan's clean air, water, and wildlife. So NWF has been doing this for quite a long time. A lot of the work that we're doing across the region impacts Detroit. And so it's not just the Great Northwoods. It's a lot of the work to protect habitat, ensuring that the habitat provides place for wildlife, but also people, the cultural and the spiritual aspects, and also the economic aspects of this. It all impacts what happens up in the Northwoods, and every other spot around the region impacts Detroit and impacts suburban Detroit. So we're vitally interested in this work, and I'm happy to talk more about this important issue.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Next up, Antonio Cosme. Antonio's co-founder of Black to the Land Coalition, and he's been building relationships between Detroit communities, Indigenous communities in the Upper Peninsula, getting people outdoors. Antonio, thanks so much for being here. What does this connection mean to you?
It means so many things. Like, I think we have to like look back at history. My background's in economics, and I'm often doing presentations in Detroit, educating people about, the history of Michigan and the clear cutting of Michigan forests. Built Detroit ultimately. So Detroit was kind of built off of some of the clear cutting in the Northwoods. A lot of the industrial wealth that helped build Detroit helped flow north and make a lot of those cities more, viable. After that, around the mid 19th century or 20th century, like working class people had jobs that allowed them to travel and visit north. Me, as a young person, I would travel to Pictured Rocks and to Quamanon Falls. But as an adult, I've, been able to form my own relationship with it. That's a little bit beyond like just kind of like tourism and visiting that in that way. I've been able to paddle along the islands in northern Wisconsin, the Lake Superior. I've been able to learn how to hunt on the Lac du Flambeau Reservation in Wisconsin. I harvest wild rice with my buddy Greg Johnson up there. Um, a person came from the Keweenaw Indian community and taught us how to make start our maple syrup operation down in Detroit. So there's been this like transfer of knowledge and relationships through Black to Land. We've led camping trips up there to make like birch baskets and harvest some of the trees that are really only available in the Northwoods because of just the climate that's up there. So yeah, I've had like this like kind of deep enduring love for the Upper Peninsula and the Northwoods, which for folks who don't know is generally thought of as like above the 45th parallel. So it's like that kind of sub-boreal woods that exist in northern Michigan, northern Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Canada. So yeah, I've just really, really enjoyed getting to know. Like I have like Northwoods goals. I would love to get into Boundary Waters. I've never been up there yet, but it's a beautiful place. There's an amazing place called North House Folk School, where I've taken a bunch of classes, and it's like right on the North Shore of Minnesota. There's just so many amazing gems in the Northwoods, and I'm happy to like help connect Detroiters to that wonderful legacy. And we've long been connected with the Northwoods as Detroiters, and yeah, I think our futures are certainly tied together as they've been historically.
Awesome. I want to learn more about that bucket list, but right now we're going to move on to Garrett Dempsey, finally from Detroit Outdoors with the Sierra Club. Garrett works to get Detroit young people on trips to the Upper Peninsula and other natural areas. Recently, he was up in the Upper Peninsula taking a group out ice climbing on frozen waterfalls, which was, I was there too, and it was amazing to see people climbing those waterfalls. Garrett, thanks so much for joining us. What's your stake in history in the conversation?
Thanks, Nina. Happy to be here. And I should say, Antonio and I were both on some frozen waterfalls last week.
Oh, right. Yeah, I
And
didn't
so
stand
we had the pleasure of both being up here. And then like what you described, Nina, we actually have a group of 12 Detroit high schoolers that are with us right now. I'm tuning in from Northern Michigan University, actually, and we have those students spending a day on campus with the Outdoor Recreation Leadership Program, and some of the students and the faculty that are here getting a little taste of what it's like to be on campus, in this case in Northern Michigan. And the students that are welcoming us took us on a hike through the forest, snowshoe hike today around Presque Isle here in Marquette, Michigan. So yeah, it's been really special and fantastic. I mean, I could just describe like the last, sort of like 4 days with the students and just say, and that's what this all means to us, right? But I'll just back up though a little bit, for the folks joining, to give some context about like what brings me to the conversation. And like you said, I work for the Sierra Club. I'm the Sierra Club representative with the Detroit Outdoors Collaborative. And the Detroit Outdoors Collaborative, a key partner being Detroit Parks and Rec Department, came together about 8 years ago to find ways to lower barriers of access for young people in Detroit to have meaningful experiences in nature and the great outdoors. And, we started in Detroit by reactivating the only campground in the city of Detroit, which is in Rouge Park, and working with teachers and other adults that have trusting relationships with kids to help those adults borrow camping gear from us and lead camping trips for young people, so that young people can have a connection that mean something to them in the outdoors through camping or just taking trips close to home. And then when we think of the Northwoods, we're really just, as people, we have these intersecting, radiating networks of connections. And so there's like these communities that we are connected to that in a very real way up here in the Northwoods. And so this is an area that, represents an opportunity for these young people we work with in Detroit to sort of expand their horizons. And by coming up here, meeting people, experiencing the space, sort of like understand their current connections and some of the things Antonio talked about too, which is like the historical context and the stories that, brought us to where we are today.
Got it. Well, thanks to all of you for the amazing work that you're doing. It's really inspiring. And I've just been I've been a fan of all of you for a few years now. Just a reminder to those tuning in, wherever you're tuning in from, whether it's on LinkedIn or YouTube, if you want to throw a comment or a question in the chat, we will try to address it. So let's dive in a little deeper and talk about that connection. I want to start with a basic question that I think a lot of Detroiters, especially those that have not had the opportunity to visit the Northwoods, might have. Why should I care about forests that are 300 miles away? Mark, let's start with you. From an ecosystem perspective, how do Michigan's northern forests actually affect the air, the water, our livelihoods here in Metro Detroit and in Detroit?
Yeah, well, I think one of the biggest things, as Antonio and Garrett were saying, is access to the outdoors. It's so important for our well-being and our quality of life. And so having the proximity, and 300 miles seems like a long time, but in reality, it's really not. And we have that unique habitat here in Michigan that has world-class hunting and fishing opportunities that is accessible for everyone. There's no place in the country that I can think of where you can have smallmouth, largemouth, trout, pike, salmon, whitefish, steelhead, rainbow trout, muskie, all accessible for you, and not only for recreational things, but for subsistence living. People rely upon the fishery for their livelihoods and to feed their families. And so the northern woods provide that refuge for a lot of the cover for our wildlife. And the communities that rely upon them, our forests absorb carbon, which makes our atmosphere cleaner for everyone. But they also are a challenge in that when they do burn from forest fires, as we've all known, we can be filled up with the air with smog from the forest fires up north.
Recently, just in the last few years.
Very recently, right. So they are an opportunity for us to access nature in a way that connects us to the land, and communities rely upon it. So it's vitally important to have that. And there's also nature at home, right? And to know that we have roadless areas or vast tracts of open land. It's good to know that we have that, but it doesn't mean you have to travel 300 miles to get that. You can get that in Detroit suburban areas and find that close to where you live. But really, for me, it's the opportunity to know that we had that, because that provides a sense of uniqueness for us here and connection. And it allows people want to move here. Businesses want to move here, knowing that we have this recreational opportunity and a quality of life and clean water. I mean, up here we have 95% of North America's fresh water here in the Great Lakes, 20% of the world's fresh water. This is an asset that is unique to us, and we need to protect it. And it's a nice thing to know that we have it, because we and had that connection to it. So that's really in a nutshell what this all means.
Got it. So Antonio, I want to bring you in here. You've been doing this amazing work to connect Detroiters, particularly Black Detroiters, to the land, not only up north, but also here in Detroit as well. Why does that matter? What's missing when people, especially people of color, don't have that connection, and what changes when they do?
I think one of the more devastating things about the ways in which the primary ecological interruptions of colonialism have done to us is that we're so separated from real ecosystems. Here in Detroit, I think it's 98 or 95% of wetlands have been eliminated. We don't have very many old growth bits of forest. There's a little patches here and there. I work in Rouge Park as well, and that's like a nice patch. We have like 100 acres of like kind of an old growth floodplain. But generally speaking, like relationships with nature are so restricted for Detroiters. We have a handful of places in the city, Belle Isle, Palmer Woods, Rouge Park, Heinz Drive. The metro parks are nice, but just getting into places that are old growth, pristine mountains, like the world's largest coastal wetlands in Bad River and the world's largest wild rice beds, places like Pictured Rocks where you could see like the sandstone walls and climb those as we just did. I mean, there's universities that have high degree programs that you're not going to find anywhere else, like in Houghton, where there's the best forestry program in the region. There's like closed reservations like on Red Lake, where you're never going to experience anything closer to Indigenous sovereignty, where they can actually shut the doors and allow who comes in, and who comes out. I mean, that's just something that's it's incredible that people don't know about and don't have an often opportunity to really experience, unless you get up there and go and see those places. And I think building even just like traditional skills like you could learn at like a place like North House Folk School. There's like a bit of that like folk school culture in Detroit and Michigan.
Mhm.
But man, it's just nice to get up to a place where the ecosystems are bigger, older, and more whole.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Garrett, I'd like you to chime in. You also do amazing work taking young people from Detroit up north. Tell us about what kind of transformations you've witnessed. What happens when a kid from Detroit who's never been up north experiences the UP or the Porcupine Mountains for the first time?
I mean, we get to witness a lot of awe. There
Mm.
is a plenty of sort of experience of taking these things in these spaces and being here, and really just being amazed by them. And I got to say, one of the ways that we do this too is it's not just the individual and the open space, right? Like we are here right now with 12 high schoolers from 5 different high schools in Detroit. We have probably another 12 caring adults. Some of them are teachers, some of them know some of these kids. So we've got this community of people that have come up from Detroit to be in this space together. So it's really it's not just sort of like being in awe of the amazing part of the forest, but I feel like what we try to bring is also this human community, and then sort of like merge them together, and I feel that's an important part of it, because I think people are then like walking away from this experience not just loving sort of the Lake Superior, right, or seeing these amazing ice formations, but I think those experiences and the memories are kind of infused with a deepening of a relationship with like someone from their school, or a new friend that they made at another school, or an adult that they had a conversation with that shared something about like the way that their story that's really sort of changed the way they look at the world. So and then I'll say, in terms of some of the things that we see after these trips, we have one young woman that's here right now. She's a senior and she's enrolled. She's going to be at Northern next year, and her first time ever in the UP was last summer on a
Wow.
Detroit Outdoors backpacking trip in the Porcupine Mountains, and like she really fell in love with this place and decided like this is where she wants to go to college. And then there's another young woman who is she's the president of her outdoor adventure club, and 2 years ago, she came to the UP for the first time and came ice climbing with us, and she wanted to come back. And she's going to be a forestry major at Michigan State University in this coming fall. So those are 2 examples of some of the impressions that the young people walk away with. And it doesn't have to just be, it's not. Sometimes it's really just that's maybe a memory they carry with them, and their relationship with nature is going to grow in a different way. So, I mean, that's why we do it. It's not because we want a particular result. We just want to connect these young people in a meaningful way with nature, and then they can build that relationship in the way that makes sense to them, as they move on through life.
So, unfortunately, Jerry Jandro was unable to join us today, but I know Garrett and Antonio, you've both worked with him in different ways. What is it like to work with the Indigenous community in Michigan's Upper Peninsula? What kind of connections have you made? What opportunities do you see for um, awareness building, connection building between Detroiters and Indigenous folks. Either one of you can jump in.
Garrett, you want to bite that one first?
Sure. I'll jump in, and it's actually I'm glad you had mentioned Jerry, because I was thinking about Jerry when Antonio was describing just really sort of like the power and the richness of these ecosystems in the North Woods, and so I'll share this one story about Jerry in terms of response to your question, Nina. But
tell us who Jerry is, because folks may not know.
Well, yeah, Jerry Jandro is a friend and an amazing man. Um, uh, he's from the Keweenaw Indian community, forester by background. The guy can kick a pretty mean soccer ball as well. But he's a sugar, maple sugar ricer. I mean, so much, right? And he's a farmer. But he's really been welcoming to us in our work in Detroit Outdoors, sharing sort of his connection and his knowledge of the land and his Ojibwe learnings, and also expressed so much curiosity about the young people and the communities that we work with. And so, like, my story about Jerry is, I saw him one time work with a group of young people from Detroit, talking about some plants that he encouraged them to go out and find in their own neighborhoods. Talk about some Ojibwe teachings and learnings, and it was a way for the Great Northwoods, sort of like represented and shared by Jerry, even through storytelling. Like our young people in Detroit went through this exercise after spending time with Jerry, and they talked about like seeing things in their neighborhood that they hadn't seen before, because there was an invitation from Jerry, someone who is, from these Northwoods, asking them to think about like the plants that they share their neighborhood with. And so even without going to the Northwoods, someone like Jerry from an Ojibwe community, who's nice enough to be in community with us, can have an impact, on our young people.
Awesome.
Yeah, I've had a lot of like beautiful relationships and interactions and opportunities. My very first hunt, like I mentioned earlier, was on Lac du Flambeau Reservation with this guy named Greg Johnson, who's the leader up in that community. And I learning a new relationship with deer. Like, one thing I was taught by him is that when you take a deer, the first deer you kill, you have to give away. And I was able to give that deer away to this elder named Mary Moose. Another thing that he taught me is that like those deer want to go with you, and like they actually are letting you hunt them, and it's just a reorientation in that relationship. I think a lot of people are like, I feel like they're conquering, or like they're somehow dominating nature, but nature has pity on us, and that's like a Anishinaabe teaching, is that nature takes pity on us and feeds us and provides its abundance to us, and those animals take pity on us, and they want to come with us and let us harvest them. And I've brought that back, and I've been helping get Detroiters hunting. We started programs to gain access to private land and help get people first time hunting, and creating hunting mentorship relationships. But I think it's deeper than just going up north and hunting and participating in cool things like wild rice, and learning skills like we learned from Jerry Jandro. He has Dynamite Hills Farms is the name of his farm. I just wanted to officially name that, and so people can search him up. He's a really cool guy. He does a lot of great talks. He's by training he's a forester. He also does woodland firefighting work, which is pretty cool. But yeah, he's definitely big into wild rice as well. But I think one of the things, as urban people, as people in Detroit, areas like Detroit, I think there's a lot of environmental justice issues that we think about as people who are on the front lines of, climate change and pollution. A lot of times we limit the conversation to what's happening in 48217, which is Michigan's most polluted zip code, and is constantly competing for one of those polluted zip codes in the country. But we don't often think about environmental justice as frontline communities in the Northwoods, or in places that are a little more far flung. Bad River's been one of the tribes fighting Line 5, really, really well. There's a fantastic documentary people can check out just exactly about that topic. There's a bunch of mines like the Back 40 mine, which is a nickel sulfide mine on the Wisconsin-Michigan border. There's the Copperwood mine, which is threatening the Lake Superior over near Porcupine Mountains. There's this Empire in Tilden, which is an open pit iron mine operated by Cleveland Cliffs. There's the Eagle Mine in Marquette. There's all of these mines that are going to be opening up as the United States is kind of competing for to reindustrialize. And I think we have to be aware of that. I think these things have to be done in an ethical manner. And if we don't have a relationship to these places, as the most populous area in Southeast Michigan, where a majority of the population is, if we don't have a relationship with these communities, I don't know that we'll be advocating that these things happen in a good way. And I don't know that we can stop the certain developments that are happening, but I think we can speak up as the biggest population basis for these projects, because some of these pristine natural areas need to be protected. So I think it extends into conservation. It extends into environmental justice. It extends into, the traditions and skills and knowledge that we gain from, these incredible, legacy communities.
Great. Thank you for that. Okay, that's a great segue to our next kind of discussion topic, which gets into threats that we face. And I just want to remind those that are tuning in, if you would like to ask a question, and we've got one so far, that our panel could answer, please just type it into the comments of the post that you're watching on. We will see it here, and we will do our best to address it. Okay, so what are some of the threats that are kind of facing Michigan's northern forests and by extension Detroit? A couple of things we covered in our series: climate change, federal policy. Mark, let's start with you, and let's start with climate. What's happening to Michigan's forests right now, and what could happen if current trends continue? We expect they will, both to the northern forests and to the rest of us in southern Michigan.
Yeah, no, thanks, Nina. I mean, I think in general, all the vectors of climate, whether it's intense heat, intense rainfall, these extremes that are happening more frequently, the old 100-year floods are now every 5-year floods. And that really changes how people who can manage our forests, or at least reduces the ability to predict how things are going to change and how our communities and how wildlife can adapt to that. It really throws off the balance of this. We've seen this in flooding, but we've also seen it in the intense ice storms that really wiped out a lot of the forest lands up further north.
Yeah.
We're seeing spreading of invasive species into the northern woods. Moose are being impacted from ticks because it's not as cold anymore. The ticks are not dying off. We're seeing these situations that are no longer ambiguous. When people think of climate change, we originally threw out the polar bear, but no one who has ever really seen a polar bear in person. We're seeing these changes happening right in front of us, so it is impacting us.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say that things that are happening at the federal level are not helping. Right now, we're having a situation where we are trying to roll back existing protections that will help us address and confront climate change and help us adapt to climate change, such as efforts to roll back the roadless rule that took years, decades to get in place, has been challenged in the courts to protect these roadless areas that have vast qualities for wildlife, for connectivity, for migration, for wildlife. And we have 16,000 acres of those here in Michigan that would be put under risk of increased logging, increased potential extraction resources like mining. That would, obviously allow for further discharging of industrial pollution into our waterways. That would make it eventually into Lake Superior, down to Lake Huron, down and closer into the Detroit area. We're seeing efforts to remove Clean Water Act protections, to basically give industry, basically a get out of jail card to pollute without liability on that. These efforts we're seeing to just chip away these protections that allow us to enjoy this fresh, clean water. Like I said, we have 20% of the world's fresh water here. The last thing we need to be doing is to reducing those protections. And that's kind of the theme right now at the federal level. So what we should be doing is not exacerbating that. We already know that we can adapt to some of these things that are happening with climate change, but some of the things that we're seeing come out of DC right now are not helping. And so we need to really address those things, because we only have so much time before our climate here in Michigan resembles Oklahoma. And that's a reality. And what are we going to be doing to prevent that?
So our third article in the series focuses on this bill, the Permit Act. Can you just share a little bit more about what that is, where it is, and why it matters to potentially our drinking water?
Yeah, no, the Permit Act is moving through Congress right now. And to back up, the Clean Water Act has been one of the most protective, bipartisan success stories in our environmental history in the United States. Essentially, no one is allowed to discharge into waters without a permit, period. And what this bill would do would remove and exempt some of these protected watersheds for us, right? It would allow industry to continue to pollute unregulated and actually have industry consider, instead of the water quality and the vitality of our human health, they're putting dollars in there. How much would it cost for industry to put in these controls? And if it's too costly, then you don't have to do it. That's a whole nother framework. That's not what we created the Clean Water Act to do. So this is a fundamental threat to the basic core tenet of keeping our waters clean. The House Representatives passed it in December. The Senate is considering it right now. So it's really in front of us right now. And we need our champions here in the Great Lakes and across the country to realize that clean water is not just about economics, it's about our quality of life, and we need to have a balance. And these things that are happening right now in DC, this is not balance. This is tilting the equation towards industry, further pollution, which impacts all of us. So that's a negative thing happening with the Permit Act, and hopefully we'll see what happens in the Senate. But I don't know what's going to happen. It's a wild card with this Congress right now. So if you take time to call your member of Congress and have them oppose this Permit Act.
Thanks for that. Antonio, you talked a little bit already about kind of the connection between environmental justice issues in rural and urban communities like Detroit. You mentioned the proposed copper mine. We're seeing threats from multiple directions. What are the connections? What connections are being made between people who are addressing urban frontline issues and those who are potentially addressing these, also serious issues in more rural areas? Are there connections being made across those lines? Are the groups still siloed? Is the work you're doing addressing that?
I'd say Line 5 has been a connecting point. I think there's a strong basis of opposition to Line 5 that exists in Southeast Michigan. And one of the major points in Line 5 has been the bridge between the Upper Peninsula and the Lower Peninsula. And that has been active in a while. And we've been connecting and learning from environmental groups that have been resisting out in Wisconsin and Minnesota, because that Line 5 stretches from the tar sands of Canada all the way down to Sarnia, where they connect in Southeast Michigan to Canada, where there's actually into another reservation where they are polluting and being processed and shipped out of the St. Lawrence Freeway. So yeah, that is a connection around tar sands that has been made. But I think there needs to be a lot more, and I think there needs to be more relationship. I think, generally speaking, like, you have to have a level of income to get up there in general, so there's like a privilege piece. And I think the expansion of lumber harvesting, I think Trump wanted to make us more independent, so we stopped stopped importing from Canada for a little while. I hope that is changing. That was a really, really foolish policy. There's so much more woods up there, and I know that in Lac du Flambeau, my buddy had been working with the Forestry Services to protect a section of the woods, and as the Trump administration came in, those protections were lost. He had actually even interned some really special sacred items to his community and his family in those woods, and those woods are on cue to be harvested now. I think we share issues with invasive species.
Right.
So the emerald ash borers kind of struck Detroit in the 70s and 80s. And they're just now getting into the Northwoods. And it's not just the change in tree structure and canopy, which is drastic and has, long-lasting impacts that I think like we're even not even so quick to understand and recognize if we're not like forest ecologists. But there's cultural implications. Ash basket making has been something that's been happening in the Great Lakes since time immemorial. And
Mhm.
ash basket makers are scrambling to harvest what is potentially the last like 10 years of ash trees. So like this traditional ecological skill may be lost because of these the emerald ash borer spreading slowly into that area. I know that every summer we're all being increasingly impacted by these Canadian wildfires, but we are not very far off with some climate chaos that causes the Great Lakes to start setting ablaze in the summer, and that would be something that would be like a pretty terrible thing. I do controlled burns part time, um, and they're good and healthy. Forest like fires are good for ecosystems, but when you have drought and like a lot of times these forests that are plantations after clear cutting has happened, they're like those tree species that come in are often like very likely to burn even more. There's threats not just to the woods but also the waters. The National Wildlife Federation has been doing a fantastic job of opposing the Mark could talk about this, but the fish from entering the Great Lakes. But something that I don't think has gotten enough shine and enough attention is the zebra mussels and quagga mussels kind of came to the Great Lakes from this ballast waters, and the zebra mussels populations kind of came up and exploded, and they've actually gone down significantly. But the quagga mussels are much deeper. They're able to like literally coat the bottom of Lake Superior, and these mussels are eating so much of the zooplankton and filtering so much of the water that they're crashing whitefish populations. And whitefish are a really important foodstuff, especially for indigenous communities. And a lot of people don't recognize like the ways in which the native communities in the Great Lakes steward the fish. They have so many hatcheries, and they really do a lot to help like protect fish.
Mhm. Mhm.
But that's an interesting tension point between settler sports fishing communities and native communities.
Mhm.
That's a very nuanced conversation.
Mhm.
The Great Lakes flood of 2020, like that was huge. I mean, we felt it on Belle Isle.
Yeah.
They were feeling it on shoreline property all along the Upper Peninsula. I remember driving around and seeing a lot of flooded houses when it was
Yep.
happening, and that flooded out sections and destroyed our a forest that we had, oak forest that we had on Belle Isle. So
Yep.
that's something that connects us. And yeah, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the mining that happens in those areas, like Lake Superior is truly, I mean, all of the Great Lakes are inland seas, but Lake Superior is truly, truly, truly an inland sea. It's just like one of the deepest lakes in the world, other than like Lake Baikal and like another lake in Africa. It's like the top 4 or 5. Um, and it's these mines that are all around the Upper Peninsula because of the rock deposits that are up there, are threaten the clean water that exists in the Upper Peninsula. I think another threat that's going to be coming with climate change is more people moving to Michigan and more wealthy people wanting shoreline development and the fragmentation that happens from the development of nature in communities. I think housing costs in the Marquette area are way, way, way on the rise. I was just talking to people about this when I was up there at Ice Fest. So, yeah, all of these, issues that we feel down in Southeast Michigan, whether it be like the pressure of, gentrification, they're feeling it in Northwood cities.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of interconnections, but I think not a lot of people are making those dots and connecting those relationships and connecting those communities. We need more people to have a broader Great Lakes consciousness out here.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, wow, thanks. That was a whole litany of things that I would like to dive into one by one, but we don't have time today, obviously. But thank you for connecting all of those dots and for doing that for us. Um, okay, we're moving into our last section where we're trying to get back a little bit to the positive, while still talking about some of the challenges that we're facing. A reminder to those of you tuning in, I think mostly on YouTube at this point. If you have any questions for our panelists, please type them into the comments and we will see them here and try to address them. So Garrett, I want to bring you back into the conversation. We've talked a lot about just this whole idea of we have to make these connections. And you've been doing that, group by group. Tell us a little bit more about how that works. What does Detroit Outdoors do? How do the trips work? How many people are you able to bring along? What are the challenges to doing that? And what kind of impact are you seeing? You told us a little bit about that before, but please feel free to expand.
Yeah, for us at Detroit Outdoors, it really just begins with a belief that helping a young person have a meaningful experience in nature and to start to build a relationship with nature is a very positive thing, a really important thing to do with that young person, for that young person, and as part of a broader community. It's good for the person, it's good for the planet, it's good for the environment. And we don't necessarily do it in this prescriptive way where we think like, okay, we're going to get them camping and then we're going to get them to buy this product, or it's like, it's not like this and then that. It's really, we just know that experience in and of itself can have so many positive impacts on the young person, on their families, on their communities. As I'm hearing Mark and Antonio and you, Nina, kind of have the conversation the last 10 minutes about, like kind of expansive, across the region, I'm thinking of some of these young people and the teachers and the communities we work with, and I'm seeing like in the way that they sort of fit into some of these spaces. And I'll back up a little bit to talk about like our approach with our program and maybe offer some examples of how those bridges are built and those connections are made. But like I said earlier in the call, like we really are built around in Detroit Outdoors a collaborative approach where we share resources like access to camping gear, access to leadership training, helping teachers and adults that work with kids, get to a campsite and camp close to home. And then really just support them having these experiences that that can be meaningful to the kids, because it could be all about like what the class is studying. It could be if it's a team and it helps build a stronger team. Now these kids have like this increased sort of relationship with each other and their coach that's really sort of cultivated in nature, and so that's what we believe is like we can help a lot of people that work with kids have like add nature exposure into their programming. And then in terms of how sometimes these connections are made to these larger issues, I'll offer an example of a young woman who she was new to the United States, and in her first 6 months, she hardly spoke any English. Like her first experience in nature was going up to Pictured Rocks, with a partner that we love and we work with a lot, that actually we're here with right now at Northern Michigan University. It's called the Bus for Outdoor Access and Teaching. It's a school bus, gear library, supportive staff. And so this young woman and her brother go 5.5 hours north to Pictured Rocks, experience the Northwoods for the first time. And she has fallen in love with nature. She has an identity of an outdoors person. She became the president of her outdoor adventure club at her high school. And now she's at Michigan State. She's, involved in the outdoor adventure club there. And then she's also joined the Sierra Student Coalition because she remembers oh, Garrett works with Sierra Club. That's part of Detroit Outdoors. And she's had opportunities to sort of advocate for environmental issues. And so, she has this relationship with the Northwoods, even though she's from Metro Detroit, and now she's finding a community at her college to sort of continue to advocate. And there's a lot of stories like that where these young people, are finding their community, but they're sort of connecting it back to these experiences that, Detroit Outdoors just had one little piece in sort of helping sort of facilitate these meaningful experiences in nature.
Yeah, I would say having your first Northwoods experience at Pictured Rocks would hook you for life for most people, I think, for a lot of people. Awesome. And
but she knew it before. She loves to tell the story. She's like, we didn't understand because, English was new for her. She's like, we didn't know what they meant by camping. And then she's like, we get on the bus and they're like, 5 hours? We're going to sleep in the woods? Who does that? But they're already on the bus, so they're stuck.
Sometimes it's better not to know and just to be thrust into a situation.
Yeah. Changed her life.
I bet. Antonio, you do similar work, but you really have this particular focus on building relationships with Indigenous communities. What does that look like in practice, bringing folks from Detroit into those communities? What kind of preparation does it take? What does it end up looking like?
Yeah, I think it's always good to start local, you know, like meeting communities around you.
Yeah.
And I think it's like there's a lot of awesome organizations in the Detroit area. You know, we started Indigenous Peoples Day here in the city, and we had the first powwow downtown. That's like a brand new thing that just happened this past year. That's an
Yeah.
awesome opportunity. There's a lot of powwows. I think meeting Native people just locally is a great way to start. Um, for me, it's kind of been very, like, I don't know, incidental. The opportunities and relationships have unfolded in weird ways. I was able to attend this like intertribal food summit, and that made me connected me with a lot of people. And I've just like really worked hard to maintain those relationships and those connections.
Mhm.
And I think um, it's like one thing I've struggled with is how to like make them more accessible to other people. I think
Right.
one way that we've done it is we've started this like wild rice activities in the Detroit area where we'll bring wild rice from up north and process it, because we can't take everybody up north to harvest wild rice, but
Right.
you know, but we can like bring that skill back, and encourage more people to connect that way. And I think like more broadly than just the native relationship, I think everybody should just develop a relationship with the region in general. And it happens that there's a lot of reservations in those areas too. So you could like check out like there's like the easiest first step to building a relationship with the Northwoods is like Sleeping Bear Sand Dunes. It's technically above the 45th parallel. It's like a 4 or 5 hour trip. It's an incredible view. It's like you're like I think maybe 400 feet above the Lake Michigan, and you could climb all the way down. But big warning, you got to climb all the way
Yeah.
back up.
Like,
And if
don't
you
do
can't do
it.
it yourself, and if you're not fit enough, they will fine you big to bring you back up. But I think, man, I loved that as a young
You
person.
climbed
That
down
was
there though, didn't you? The first time you saw
Oh
it, right?
yeah, for
Yeah, of
sure,
course.
for sure. Yeah, it was very inspiring, very challenging. But yeah, it definitely like will make you fall in love with the Great Lakes to just experience such a big natural feature, a giant sand dune. And there's a reservation, there's native communities that are immediately around that area.
Mhm.
So you could connect in with some of their, like go up to like a powwow they're hosting, and then, you know, check out Sleeping Bear Sand Dunes. There's some
Mhm.
old growth forests that are amazing right up there. Anybody could hike the North Country Trail, like the Manistee section
Mhm.
is like a section that I particularly love, especially in the fall. Like the fall colors, it's like it's traveling along the Manistee River. The North Country Trail comes all the way down to Detroit as well, but
Right, right.
um, there's a section in the Manistee River where it's like you're on these like large hills overlooking the Manistee River, and it's just incredible in that, like, you know, early to mid October time of the year. I can't. It's one of the most like joyous experiences hiking for me that I've ever had, backpacking.
Yeah.
Another great way to tap in with a lot of community is Labor Day weekend. I know May Day is the real Labor Day, and the United States has tried to undermine that with the Labor Day in September. But it's a good time to go up north and check out the paddle out protest that happens in the Mackinac Straits every year. And it's like there's like a camp that happens in Eagle, Michigan, which is a little bit south of the Mackinac Straits. But we paddle the straits. There's camping, excursions. There's like a lot of the native communities resisting Line 5 and is down is there that weekend. So I invite anybody to come up. Just type in paddle out protest. There's also like a music festival that happens that same weekend, the Water is Life Festival. I know NWF has been doing a lot to support Line 5 over the years, so a shout out to them for that.
Yeah.
Then if you want to go a little further, there's Pictured Rocks, Aquamanon Falls, Porcupine Mountains. You could take classes at North House Folk School. And if you're super adventurous, that Boundary Waters trip is like, for me, like where I want to be going. But you can like work with an outfitter to traverse these lakes that are like the border between Canada and Minnesota. And it's just like this really expansive old growth like ecosystem, because you just can't log back there. I mean, it's a really, really beautiful place. Let's talk about like pristine wilderness ecosystems. That's a really cool place that I intend to be. But yeah, I don't know. I would say if I had like a quintessential experience in the Northwoods, it's like Jerry Jandro for a while. He used to host these uh fall feasts. And he has like a little apple orchard in where his sugar bush operation is at Dynamite Hills Farms. And I just remember swimming in a waterfall like in this like area, like the Porcupine Mountains area. The mountains and hills and rock formations are extend outside of that area, and we were just in like a place that only locals would know, and we were cooking up some sausages on the shore and just eating. And I just remember just what like just experiencing that like UP life for a moment. It was just a very, very special thing to me to be in a place that's just like outside of the tourist zones and, you know, close to the reservation. And yeah, I'll always remember that experience in those summers. And yeah, like getting to know locals up there. So you have people to visit and connect with. There's a really cool community in Houghton if you want to go really far north. There's a lot of like awesome people doing really dynamic work there. So there's like so much to do and find and connect with. And
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of conferences that you could go to that'll take you up north. But yeah, I think you just go. Like you just gotta go and start forming relationships.
Yeah, I am with you on the Boundary Waters. I haven't done that yet either, and it's getting to be time, I think, because
I'll just chime in. We've got one of the young women on our trip today in Northern was on a Boundary Waters trip with us 2 years ago, and on the way up and back to from Detroit to the Boundary Waters, we stopped at Jerry's house, and Jerry Jandro opened his home and his farm up for our crew as like a little harbor, a safe point to hang out on the reservation at his house around a fire, guitar. So that relationship building and, you know, stitching those things together, building that community, like Antonio was talking, you know, like we've been lucky enough to be able to do it.
Awesome. Okay, well, like I said, I'm just continue to be so inspired by the work that you're all doing. We have a couple of audience questions that I will throw up just in our last few minutes together. We have a question from Sarah C. Is there any data on how many people from Detroit, especially the Black community, have been up north or have been hiking or camping or nature in general? I know there's some research out there. I know we've reported on it. And does any data come to anyone's mind or any thoughts about that?
I'll just say the Outdoor Industry Association does publish some. I think it's like every year, they do a lot of data collection, not necessarily framed in the way that Sarah's asking the question, but they'll talk about trends that they see, and they have demographic trends as well in terms of like by race and ethnicity.
And are we seeing a growth, change, steady? I mean, I'm assuming.
I shouldn't even venture to say what I remember them reporting because I might.
Okay, so I guess, Sarah, the answer is Detroit or the outdoor. What was it again? The Outdoors Association.
Outdoor Industry Association.
Industry Association. I know we just published a story about the ski event. I'm blanking on the name right now.
Jim Dandy. Yeah.
Jim Dandy. Thanks. My brain does that whenever I really want to retrieve a piece of information. I can't.
The oldest Black ski club in the country is based in Detroit.
Ski club in the country, based in Detroit. Ian Solomon did an amazing video and article for us on that. And the outdoor ski industry published some information about just black skiers, and it was, I think, 2%, which is obviously disproportionately low and a very expensive sport. So I think there are data out there, Sarah, but
yeah, that'll be a tough one to track. Like I think if you could somehow measure the race of everybody crossing that bridge, maybe you could get an idea. But I think that's a really tough one to track. I don't think there's anybody like taking measure of like the race of people, crossing into the Upper Peninsula or the Northwoods, that I know of at least.
Yeah. Well,
but there is like some interesting programs. I was looking online, and there's apparently this like Black Men Northwoods retreat that's happened. Maybe it was like a Wisconsin DNR project that was like about like healing, and it was getting people in like northern Wisconsin up into the woods. Black to Land Coalition, we are often like we try to make it a point at least once a year to go into the Upper Peninsula and do an excursion up there. But yeah, I think it's just more people need to go. That's like the answer ultimately. Like whatever the data, like the answer in the data is going to be that more Black and brown people need to be getting up there.
Right.
So
I will also say, I know Ian Solomon, who is he works with the Detroit Parks Coalition, and he also works with us at Planet Detroit on some outdoors reporting. He did an independent survey, I think mostly within his community of people that he knows, and he's got some data around it too that I can try to share out.
Yeah, it has a really awesome page called Amplify Outside. You can follow and check out.
Thank you. Yeah, Amplify Outside. We'll send some links out too after the event. Okay, what else? We've got 5 minutes left. I think we have one question from Connie Boris. Any thoughts on developing a strategy to reverse the environmental damage being done by the current administration? I hate to end on a sad note, but let's think about, I think, maybe the positive. What can we do from here? I guess I'll frame it that way, given what we've been through in the last year.
Yeah, it's a great question, and a lot of the all the conservation community, environmental community, hunting and angling community, wildlife community have all been trying to figure this strategy out. And I think if you look back to last spring and when this flurry of federal uncertainty of spending cuts, layoffs, furloughs, no one, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, no one was really clear on where this was all going. Which is constantly changing. It was just like this, an avalanche of information and trying to figure out where to go. I think in a lot of ways we've weathered through some of that, right? I think we've went through triage, and as I was telling Nina before we got on, was this just for example, just this January, the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative got an increase in funding in the budget and the appropriations process, and is on the way being reauthorized again in the Senate. This is a program that provides invasive species control, toxic hotspots, wetland restoration, a huge vital program for our region in the Northwoods. We're seeing some fishery research bills being passed and signed into law that sends federal dollars for the hatcheries and some of the monitoring programs. We're seeing efforts to restore some of the funding that was cut even just last year from the Science Center here at USGS here in Ann Arbor. So we're starting to see Congress starting to kind of grab hold of their constitutional authority to appropriate and authorize funds to run, programs that help Great Lakes water and Northwoods programs that we're talking about today. But I think the key thing, honestly, is showing the connection of people, and showing the connection of the federal government has a role to help advance our quality of life, right? The federal government has a role in investing in science, investing in research that helps protect our fisheries, perhaps protect our wildlife, helps protect clean water that we all enjoy. And water polls ridiculous high levels. People connect with water. They want fresh, clean water. And the federal government has a role in doing that. So the more connections we can make to clean water and the role the federal government having to help us advance this quality of life, getting that message across the Congress is one thing that we're trying to streamline, and telling those stories of examples of federal dollars going into programs and investments of cleaning up toxic hotspots here in Michigan, providing access programs, and the value that provides for communities, for people from all walks of life, that they can benefit from that. Those stories back to the appropriators and the decision makers in DC and in Lansing is what we need to do. And that's why we're trying to get those voices to the table to talk to these members of Congress, to show the value that they have, that they can provide. And so that's one strategy that seems to be helping turn the tide a little bit. We're not out of the water at any stretch of the imagination. And I know this sounds kind of cavalier, but I am glass half full. And I do think that our efforts have been making a difference. And we're starting to see a little bit of a different tide here than it was the first couple months of the administration. So I always want to, that's a hopeful answer. And so Antonio and Jared, please chime in.
So we have like
Spread
1
the
minute
hope.
left. I want to just give each of you, like 20 seconds to share any last thoughts before we let everybody get on with their day. Garrett, anything you want to share?
I'll just, Antonio said it a couple of times, like, man, just get up here, go do it. There is wonderful people and wonderful places up here in the Northwoods, and it can mean a lot to come connect with it. So I encourage folks to find a way.
Awesome. Antonio, 20 seconds.
Yeah, protecting the Northwoods is really important. Follow Protect the Porkies on Instagram. That's a fantastic institution, but you don't got to go all the way so far north for important conservation initiatives. Support the Save Sibley Prairie effort here in Southeast Michigan. We're trying to protect this last bit of lake plain, old growth prairie. tap in savesibleyprairie.org or .com.
Okay, Mark, any parting words?
Yeah, and the old adage of all politics is local, I really think that translates into all nature is local. And, you don't have to go all the way up to the Northwoods to find it. In areas around Detroit, you can find it. It's there. And NWF is really working hard to try to help that we have a Sacred Grounds program that's looking at taking places of worship and providing native habitat so that people can connect in their neighborhoods and in their communities and see that small little, acre of property, and seeing how we can plant native habitat that helps stormwater retention, that is a place for butterflies and all types of pollinators. We can do some of these things locally. We don't have to go all the way up to the Northwoods to do it. So again, all nature's local.
All right. Well, thank you so much for all of your time, all of the work that you do. I'm Nina Ignazik with Planet Detroit. You can see our series on the connections between Detroit and the Great Northwoods at planetdetroit.org. Thank you to Mark Smith from National Wildlife Federation, Antonio Cosme from Black to the Land Coalition, and Garrett Dempsey with Detroit Outdoor Sierra Club. We are so grateful for your time today. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Great.
Thanks, Nina.